So, as you guys know, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And speaking from personal experience, there is so much that I don't know about the disease. And I think it's pretty common to not really be aware of the ins and outs. So, we really wanted to create a space where people can listen and learn about it. And we're both in our 30s, and historically, that is considered really young to be getting screenings or to even be diagnosed. And unfortunately, the reality is that it is becoming more common for women at a young age to be diagnosed with breast cancer. So I think it's really important that we start the conversation and try to learn as much as we can.
Yeah. So, as Kyra mentioned, being in your 30s, you shouldn't have to. I mean, being at any age, you shouldn't have to worry about cancer. And hopefully, someday and someday soon, we will not have to worry about breast cancer. But unfortunately, as women and even men, it is something that we have to worry about. And actually, currently, 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime, which is very scary. So, from my family, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer when she was 46, which is young. And I was 9 years old when she had breast cancer. So, from a young age, I've been like familiarized with breast cancer. And then my dad's mom had it when she was in her 70s. And so I have it very closely related to me on both sides of my family. And then there's multiple other people on my mom's extended family that have had it. So when I turned 30, I started getting like regular checkups and I go to a breast care doctor. I started getting mammograms every year when I turned 30, as well as like other exams and stuff just to, make sure that everything is good. I went to see a geneticist and I have a very high risk percentage because my mom had it when she was in her 40s and then my dad's mom had it. So there's so many factors that lead to your percentage, but the highest like risk factors are just like being a woman and getting older, and that is just scary because we can't control that. So I think it's so important for everyone to know about breast cancer, about self screenings, even if you don't have history of it in your family, because if I hadn't had history of it in my family, then I may not have been like so aware of doing screenings and, going to get mammograms. And if it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be going out and getting mammograms. I'm getting them because of my risk factors. But I think that it's even more important to like learn more about it if you have had no exposure within your family to know about, the disease itself and just kind of what to look out for. So we just want to make sure like to raise awareness about it. And we are also raising money to fund research to hopefully find a cure because like I said, we don't want women to have to go through this. And we are raising money for the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, which is an amazing foundation that is doing lots of amazing work towards researching for cures and helping women and men. Like I said, men deal with breast cancer too. So we hope that you will donate if you are able to. If you're not, that's okay. We hope that you will at least spread the word. We also have shared some resources on our Instagram for like, there's free apps that will show you how to do self exams. They're very important. Like, you can do them in the shower, you do them when you're just, getting dressed in the morning, and you should do them regularly. Um, so yeah, we have those. We have, there's resources all over the internet to tell you what you should be looking for, kind of reminders for when to see your doctor or where you can go if you don't have insurance. A lot of people do not have good insurance and don't have the resources to go see a doctor. There are resources out there for women to get these vital screenings. So if you need those resources, they are out there. But we are excited for what we have today.
So, like Kelly was mentioning, there are so many statistics and so many things to learn about this disease that we may not all know. And we will provide a link to the information so that you can do those self exams. It will be in our episode description, as well as a link on our Structured Chaos Instagram page. And I'm really looking forward to sharing all of this with you guys. And there will also be a link in there for our breast cancer donation. And if you're not able to donate, that is completely fine. Sharing with a friend is also super beneficial. So we're just filled with gratitude and really excited to be able to use our platform to inform people and have this conversation. And yeah.
Is there a universe outside of Bravo?
Did we miss the training manual to our 30s?
No. Are they for real?
Thank God for our girlfriends. Welcome to a special episode of Structured Chaos with Kelly and Kyra. Today, we're going to be doing something new for our listeners and special to us. I'm sure that you guys noticed that there's a couple new people on the screen if you're watching on Spotify or YouTube. And this is Jess and Taylor, and they're both dear friends of mine. And sadly, they have both battled breast cancer in their 30s. We are so grateful that they were not only willing, but they were excited to share their stories and what their journeys with battling breast cancer was like. We hope that you guys enjoy this, and we are so confident that you will take something away from this episode. And again, thank you for coming.
Hi, everyone, and welcome, Taylor and Jess. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're excited. Excited to get our story out there.
So if you guys want to go ahead and like introduce yourselves, if Jess, you want to start, and then you can kind of just like give a little bit of a backstory of who you are and kind of maybe like what your diagnosis was and what your journey, like a little bit about your journey.
Yeah. So I'm Jess. I'm 35 years old. I am a wife, a mom of two boys. I also have a dog, so that's kind of like my third son, really my first. But I live in Connecticut. I live a very normal life. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in April of 2023, so about a year and a half ago. And I'm still battling it today. And I'm excited to be here to talk about everything that I've gone through, but more importantly, hopefully just be a guide to people that might be going through this and listening and trying to feel less alone with their diagnosis.
I love that.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Yes. And Tay?
Yes, I'm Taylor. I'm from Connecticut as well. I am 35 years old, and I am a wife and a mom of two young kids, 9 and 11, and a dog as well, Jimmy, third child, like Jess said. And I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer at the age of 33. So I'm 2 years out now. And yeah, similar to what Jess said, just, it's hard to talk about it, but it feels good to talk about it, just to be a voice and get my story out there and just be a voice for other women and men, to, just push and tell everybody to be their best advocate, because you'll hear about my story and how it's very important to be your own advocate.
Yes. So I think with that being said, you guys can go, doesn't matter which order, but do you guys want to share with us like your initial reaction when you guys were diagnosed with breast cancer?
Yeah, I'll just jump in. So I was diagnosed when I was 32, I think. I don't know, maybe 33. and I was 35 weeks pregnant. It was literally nothing that I would ever even like think about dealing with myself. The main reason was because I lost my mom to brain cancer in um, in June of 2022. We went through a 2-year battle after she was diagnosed with glioblastoma. And that had been my only experience with cancer in my life. I am fortunate enough that prior to my mom getting diagnosed, it wasn't something that I had dealt with in the 30 years prior. So prior to my diagnosis, when I was dealing with my mom, like cancer really rocked me from that standpoint. I mean, I was part of her kind of caretaker team, and we watched her decline, and I lost her. And so when I was diagnosed with breast cancer myself, only 9 months after losing her, my only reference point to cancer was what I had just gone through with my mom. Which glioblastoma overall, the diagnosis is far worse than a breast cancer diagnosis. But for me at the time, I couldn't really separate them. And all that I kind of fixated on with a cancer diagnosis was dying and death. So it was really traumatic from that standpoint when I was initially diagnosed. And the other kind of traumatic aspect of it is so I, went through so I had felt a very big lump, but I thought it was my milk coming in. So I didn't get it checked for months. And then I finally was at an OB appointment and brought it up and said, there's something hard here. It didn't feel like a lump because it was so big. I mean, when I was diagnosed, the tumor was 11 centimeters. So it just kind of felt like my boob was hard. And the doctors weren't, my OB wasn't worried about it. Her kind of the way that she presented it was, oh, it doesn't seem like anything bad, probably tissues fused together. Like, let's get an ultrasound just to check it out. Did the ultrasound. And then even the ultrasound, the radiologist was like, we're going to do a biopsy just to be safe, but I don't think that it's anything to worry about. We'll, do the biopsy and then we'll check it again in 6 months. And so again, even when I was getting the biopsy done, like there was no real thought in my mind that this was cancer. And then when I was waiting for the biopsy results to come back, it was a Monday after I had had it done. I got a call, and it was an oncology office calling me to schedule an appointment. And I had heard nothing back about the results. So I immediately started freaking out. And I said to them, why are you calling me from the oncology office? Are the results back? And the person was just a scheduler and said, I don't have any other information for you. I just have to get this appointment scheduled. So I did that. And then literally, I think it was like 2 minutes later, the surgeon's office called me to confirm that the biopsy results were positive I had triple negative breast cancer, stage 3. So that was like a nightmare as well because it didn't go in the right order, and it just kind of led to a total breakdown with I just wasn't really able to comprehend what I had just heard. And I think, Taylor has her own story, but you can only imagine when anyone hears any type of cancer diagnosis, it rocks you. So just the way that the news was delivered and being so close to losing my mom, the initial reaction was very, very rough, to say the least. But here we are. You gotta let it sit. I think it's kind of natural to be rocked by that type of news.
Absolutely.
And Tay?
Yes, thank you, Jess. I mean, a lot of similarities, but very different too. So, my story is I went to my OBGYN in February of 2021. And I thought I felt something in my right breast, and I just like, it's hard to explain it because a lot of women say like, oh, it feels like a pea, or it feels like, like a little lump, or, whatever. But mine was just like, it felt big by the time I felt it, if that makes sense. So I had felt something in February and went to the OBGYN, who I loved. And she said to me, I said, I don't know, I think I feel something. And she did a half-ass exam. And she goes, you're young, you're fine. Women are seeing this after the COVID vaccine. Mind you, I got my COVID shot January and then February. So she said, she was like, nope, you're good. Like, do you remember that, Jess? Like, people were saying like there was like the swollen lymph nodes and everything from the COVID vaccine. I don't know if
Yeah.
your doctor like mentioned that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there were so many things
Yeah.
being thrown
Mhm.
around. And I also think it's, I don't know, kind of standard, like similar to like, I don't know,
Yeah.
people, at least the like what I've been exposed to is the doctors don't lean into this is a good chance that it could be a cancer diagnosis.
Right.
It's more like that, or like my situation where it's kind of like, I don't really think
Yeah.
so. Maybe because we're in our 30s.
She
I don't know.
literally told me, she said, she goes, you're young. And I remember her doing a breast exam, and it was literally, I remember this so clearly. It was like so light, and like, when you get a breast exam, they are like supposed to be
Hit
like
you.
all up
My
in you.
oncologist literally says, "Can I mash you up?"
No.
And I'm like,
And I remember this like so vividly. It was like so light, and she was like, you're good. And I was like, okay, this is me being crazy. I was like, she said I'm good. I'm fine. So February to fall of 2021 goes by. I start telling my husband, I'm like, I don't know, like, I feel like this is getting worse. What do you think? I'm having him feel it. He was like, you should call the doctor. You should call the doctor. Well, we were in the midst of buying a new house. My grandmother passed away unexpectedly, and then just life. So I kind of like pushed it off for a while, thinking that it's nothing. Like, she told me I was fine back in February. Like, there's no way, like, it's whatever. So I wake up in December, 3 days before Christmas, and I have like shooting pain on my right side. And I wake up and I was like, oh my God, like it hurts. Like my boob, like I have like sharp pain. Like it was like, it hurt really bad. So I get up and I actually went to go put on my bra from the day before, and I noticed there was like a huge spot on my bra, meaning that I was having
like an indent.
no like discharge from my nipple, which I had
Oh.
never noticed. So I immediately tell my mom. I call my mom, and she was like, you need to call the doctor, and you need to go to the doctor. 3 days before Christmas, I have 2 young kids. I'm like, no, not happening. Like, I'm not going to the doctor. I'm working. I'm trying to finish Christmas shopping, all the things, right? So she tells me, she's like, if you don't call the doctor, you're going to ruin my Christmas. So call the doctor. I explain everything to the receptionist. She's like, can you come in today? I said, sure. I told my boss, I need to go to the doctor. I'll be back in an hour, whatever. Well, needless to say, long story short, I didn't end up going back to work. It was 0 to 100. I went to the OBGYN, the same one that brushed me off in February, and she took one look and she was like, oh, wow. And I said, oh, wow. Yeah, because one side was like just like significantly larger. The right side was bigger. And she did her exam and everything. And she said, you need to go to the breast center right now. We're going to send you for a mammogram. And I said, okay. And I just knew that she was scared shitless in that moment. I'll never forget it because she knew, like, without even doing any testing, she knew. And she's like rubbing my back and everything, like setting me up to get me in for the mammogram. And I'm like, okay, like this woman knows something's wrong with me. So I get set up to go to the breast center. I get a mammogram immediately after the mammogram, I get an ultrasound. And during my ultrasound, the radiologist came in, and I was like, all right, this isn't good. Like, the radiologist isn't supposed to come in. You know that if the radiologist comes in, it's bad news. So the radiologist came in, and he was like, we need to send you for a biopsy. And I'm like, okay, like it's Christmas this week, like in a couple days, next week. He's like, no, now. And I said, oh, wow, okay. And he was like, I've been doing this for years. Like, this doesn't look good. And I said, okay. So I went and got the biopsy. Mind you, I'm having a mental breakdown. I'm by myself because I went here to this appointment not expecting anything. My mom kept saying, like, do you want me to come with you? I was like, Mom, no, like, I'm fine. Like, it's nothing. My husband was at work or with the kids at this point, and I called him, and I was just shaking, trembling before I went in for the biopsy. I was like, you need to come here right now. They want to do a biopsy. And he didn't even say anything. He was there within, like, God, record timing. But yeah, so they did the biopsy, got the full diagnosis right after Christmas. It was like December 27th, maybe. That it was, sure enough, stage 3 in my lymph nodes and the size of a lime. My tumor was the size of a lime by then. So I just think back and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah,
I
that's
tried to tell
insane.
you something was wrong in February, and this is the problem. And this is like why I want to get my story out there so bad. It's because, like, so many women, like, if you are not your own advocate and you don't push, like, I wish I could press rewind and say, well, let's just do an ultrasound to see. Because me now, I would be like, let's do an ultrasound. Like, let's check.
Yeah.
But back then, like, before anything, I didn't know, you
Yeah,
know?
you have no idea.
I had no
And the
clue.
thought that, like, I feel like so many women struggle with the not knowing and that they don't want to know, even though I'm sure people have like this internal, feeling like I should get this checked, I should do it. But I mean, I'm guilty of this. Like, if I don't want to know something, I just won't ask. I won't,
Right.
like, I'll stop myself from doing it. And I feel like if someone gets a positive, you know, response from the doctor, like, you're fine, that's good enough
Right. So
for
I went
someone that's
all
like
of those
terrified.
months. I literally went from February to, I remember going through the summer being like, I don't know, like, I still kind of feel it. I brought it up to my mom. But in my head, I was like, okay, Taylor, like, you're crazy. Like, the doctor told you you're fine. So stop, like, thinking that you have cancer. Like, you don't have cancer. Well, yeah, I was full of cancer. So,
I think
And I
that's
think
so important because everyone can relate, but especially women obviously relate to that with medical professionals that just make people feel crazy.
mhm.
And I think it's so important to emphasize with cancer specifically because people act like cancer is like this crazy thing that like people just jump to conclusions and like that it's no one has it and it's like
Right.
so far-fetched. And so I'm so glad that you're like emphasizing that because not only the fact that you're in your 30s but just in general, like, people don't know to advocate for themselves and it's scary. But I mean, I do this too. Like, I think, okay, well, I mean, if it was cancer, like, obviously the doctor would be taking it more seriously.
Mhm.
And it makes me nervous too for myself, for other people. I shared earlier in the intro that me and Kyra recorded that my mom had breast cancer when she was 46. So I started getting regular mammograms when I turned 30. And I go regularly to like a breast care doctor. So I feel very like, you know, in the loop with like getting my screenings and stuff, but most people at this age are not
Right.
because if you don't have a, history in your family and stuff, you wouldn't necessarily know to do that or necessarily need to. But like my mom never felt a lump or anything when she got diagnosed. She had never felt anything. So it's alarming to me. I'm always like, okay, well, hopefully like one of these, you know, things will
Yeah.
find it, but it's
And
a
like I said
really, really
too, like,
reminder.
and like, I just wanted to mention too, is that, and I think I said this before, it doesn't have to be a lump. Like mine wasn't a lump. It was just like a hard area.
Yeah, same.
And it wasn't like I would be like, oh, like this feels like a lump. Like it did not feel like a lump at all.
Mhm.
Um,
Just something that's like different
yeah,
than
it
your
was just
normal,
different.
like anything
Yeah.
different.
And it was just, so eventually by like the fall, it just was like bigger on one side. And I was like, all right,
Mhm.
something's
Right.
going on.
Right. And
And I
I
would
mean,
say,
I would always rather like feel dumb for bringing something up that's
Right.
nothing
Me too.
than
That's
not
how it always
bringing
was.
it.
And now I'm like, nope, we're bringing up all the things. Yeah.
Mhm.
and even for you too, Jess, like you've already had a child, so you know what getting your milk feels like. And even to think like this could be that, but maybe it's not. I mean, it's like you just knew something was.
It never even really like crossed my mind that it might be cancer. Like I knew that it wasn't normal after a couple of, so like I said, I it felt hard and I let it sit for a couple of months because I thought it was my milk coming in. And then after a couple of months, I remember I was like I had gotten out of the shower and I was drying off and I had like moved like this, and that lump was like protruding out. And I was like, okay, if this is milk, that wouldn't be happening. So that is what drove me to like say something to the doctor. But yeah, I mean, it's nothing, at least with my experience, and it sounds like Taylor's, like it's nothing that you kind of hear about in like the typical breast cancer stories.
Mhm.
When you hear about someone, oh, I felt a lump, like it wasn't
Mhm.
that at all.
And Jess,
So,
it's interesting that you say that too, because I've noticed like a lot of the like followers, I follow a lot of like breast cancer groups and stuff on social media. A lot of them found out when they were breastfeeding.
yeah. I've
So,
seen um I've seen in some of the, some of the oncology and research organizations um posting and publishing that there's been a stronger link lately between pregnancy and breast
mhm.
cancer. So I know that I think more money, research money moving forward is going to go towards looking into that connection and overall why so many younger women are getting diagnosed more frequently, year after year.
Mhm.
But
Interesting.
it's just crazy.
Well, thank you both for sharing the beginning of your journeys with us. And obviously, the entire journey has ups and downs. Are there specific challenges throughout each of your journeys that you want to share with us and our listeners?
Mm.
Um, I've honestly had a lot. um, Specifically, so my journey is ongoing, right? I mean, I shared initially that I'm still dealing with it. So just to give a little bit of color around that comment, so I was diagnosed with stage 3 a year and a half ago, went through chemo, radiation, immunotherapy, kind of the general standard of treatment for the type of breast cancer that I was diagnosed with, which was stage 3 triple negative. Um, and after all of my treatments, I had a mastectomy, reconstruction, all the things. I went into remission. I was cancer free, and just I continued with immunotherapy. And I continued getting MRIs and PET scans every 3 months, which is normal in your first year or two after going through treatment. And during my routine PET scan in July of this summer, something showed up in one of my ribs. Like it was bright. So my oncologist said, let's biopsy this because we want to be really sure if anything pops up, we're going to check it. It was really small and it came back positive. So with that, It's now considered stage 4 metastatic breast cancer that I have that I'm dealing with. So all of that just as I want to kind of paint the full picture of my situation. But a couple of the challenges that I experienced right off of the bat were during treatment. So the typical treatment is you do this chemotherapy for 12 sessions called Taxol and carboplatin. And so I went through a couple of treatments of that. And, they tell you that chemotherapy can have side effects, right? Like nausea, all the things. So I was expecting that. I mean, it's not a guarantee. Some people kind of get through it without a lot of side effects, and some people get through it and have terrible side effects. So you don't really know what to expect going into chemotherapy. My first treatment was fine. My second treatment, I started feeling a little crappier the day of and day after treatment, and then I was okay. And then the third treatment really rocked me. I felt like starting later that night after I had gotten the infusions, like flu-like symptoms, fever, nausea, really bad body aches, I remember. But I thought that was normal. I knew that a fever might not be normal, but it wasn't like something that I really worried about. So, I went through the next kind of day and a half with those pretty intense flu symptoms, and then they got better. And then I went and I did my fourth treatment, and the same thing happened, but it was so severe and I couldn't get the fever down that I ended up calling 911 and going to the ER in the middle of the night because I looked into it more, and a fever reaction to chemo can be like your body rejecting it. So I started freaking out. So I went to the ER, got fluids, started feeling better. And then I went and I did my fifth treatment, and the same thing happened. And finally, I said to my oncologist, like, I'm getting really sick. I know that getting sick and is part of the side effects, but then I kind of listed out everything that I was going through to him, and he was like, that's not normal. I think that you're probably reacting to one of the chemos because you're allergic to it, which can happen with the carboplatin. So we're gonna switch up that specific chemo with its kind of like cousin drug and see what happens. So they did that for the sixth treatment, and I did not have that reaction. I felt like a little cruddy, but it was night and day from going to the ER. And that was halfway through my first 12 treatments until I realized, like, okay, this isn't normal. I shouldn't be so sick. So that was tough. And then the immunotherapy also had a pretty significant side effect for me after my third infusion of the Keytruda, which is the immunotherapy. I developed Bell's palsy, which is when like half your face either freezes or half your face droops in more of the severe cases. Mine fortunately didn't droop, but it froze. So I was very lucky in that the Bell's palsy for me only lasted like 2 weeks. It can last months and months, and it can get worse and worse. But it's an autoimmune issue that can be caused by immunotherapy, kind of strengthening your immune system, and your immune system goes after your normal things because it's so hypercharged. So that happened to me in June. So it was just a really rough kind of first half during those initial 12 treatments, which were supposed to be the easier of the two, because I went through those 12, and then you switch to a different type of chemo for 4 treatments called AC, or the Red Devil is what it's known as, and it's really intense. And it's, for me at least, it was the second half of the full chemo journey. So my immune system was already pretty rocked from those first 12 treatments. So I started the AC, which made me sick, and then I think like two treatments into the AC chemo, which was 14 treatments out of the 16 total, I got COVID when I had like no immune system left. And I still had the chemotherapy left to do. So that made me feel really sick through the remainder of the treatment. And the COVID symptoms lasted me a good 5 or 6 weeks. I was coughing, no taste, no smell. It was horrible. And my body was just so depleted from all the chemo at that point. Like, I mean, in hindsight, I feel like you hear, like, if people have, at least my understanding of chemo is like, oh my God, if you get sick at all during chemo, like, that's terrible. You could die. So in hindsight, like, I got sick with something pretty significant, COVID, and I didn't die. And it like, I got through it, but it lasted a lot longer than like COVID, like situations that I had in the past. And it was really hard. So, that's my story with treatment, and there were a lot of unexpected challenges. And at the end, I mean, I remember saying to my husband, John, like, I just don't even feel like a human anymore. I just lay here in bed day after day after day, and I can't do anything. I had a newborn,
I was gonna
and
say,
at
and
that,
you have a newborn. Yeah, like it's
yeah,
not even just I'm sick, it's like I'm sick and I'm a brand new mom
yeah.
and
I had
and
a
I'm having
newborn
all
and a
these
toddler.
other
Charlie was a year and a half, and Tate was a newborn. And I was just completely like unable to do anything. So that was really hard. Like, thank God my husband's so great, but I joke. I mean, it's not really a joke, but he was essentially like a single parent during a long period of time when I was going through the treatment. And then I followed the treatment with a mastectomy, which again, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't lift my kids for a month and a half. Um, so it was really hard, but you get through it. And I remember when my mom passed, of course, saying that that was the hardest thing I'd ever gone through in my life, watching her, get worse and then ultimately pass away. And then when I got through chemo, I said no. Like, chemotherapy was actually way harder for me, at least, than watching my mom go through what she did, and losing her, which is like so crazy to me, because you lose your mom at 32 years old and you're saying that something else was harder than that. Like, it's crazy. But yeah, I mean, treatment really rocked me, and there were a lot of unexpected challenges through it, but you kind of get through it, and here we are today. So,
And I also like I know that it makes sense, but I guess just because I've never experienced it, like I wouldn't even consider being allergic to chemo and then what that would
yeah,
do or
Mhm.
what that effect would be, or like hearing that news on top of everything else. It's like we know like the association that we typically all have is you get cancer, you get chemo, the chemo helps you get better.
yeah,
So it's like to hear, oh, you have cancer and oh, you're also allergic to the chemo. Like that's like this other additional layer that I like don't think that I mean, I know I wouldn't have considered that, like let alone
yeah,
other people. I'm sure it's like, yeah, so it's just heavy all around.
yeah. It was. I had no idea. I mean, there's so many things that are associated with all of these treatments and everything that you go through after you get a cancer diagnosis, that you never would have thought about if you hadn't been forced into this world of, you know, cancer.
Yeah.
I say
And
to a lot of people, I'm like, I hate the fact that I know what a pathology report is, and like all these medical terms that I would never have like been exposed to had I not been in this situation, and have like now have this deep understanding of all of these things that I have to read and look at on a regular basis. So,
um well, Tay, what about you? Like what strategies did you find helpful for coping with like stress and anxiety like during that time?
Um, so I found it helpful. I mean, everyone says don't Google. We all Google. Um, and I think my problem was with that though is that, when you're thrown a diagnosis, oh, you have stage 3 cancer, it's in your lymph nodes. I was like, I'm going to be dead in 7 months. Like, I don't know why I had this like thing of 7 months in my head. I don't know if I read it on Google. I don't know. But like the next morning, like after we found out on a Monday night, I remember like waking up and just like not turning on the lights and just laying in my bed and just crying hysterically saying, I'm going to be dead. I'm not going to see my kids go to prom. I'm not going to see them get married. I'm not going to, my husband isn't going to have a wife. Like all these things ran through my head and I just couldn't get out of bed. But you know what? I had to snap out of it, not for me, but for my kids. So I think that, I had my moments and I was definitely down. I had my days that I would, let myself be down and I would go through it, but then I would have to just get it together again, like for my kids. It was just keeping it together and making sure that they knew I was going to be okay and that I wasn't going anywhere and that, yeah, mommy's really sick, but I'm going to be okay. And I think too, just, I said this before, social media was huge for me. I joined a lot of groups on there. I met a lot of like not met influencers, but you know what I mean? Like just like chatted with influencers that had breast cancer. And we actually like developed friendships like because of this. And also I met somebody too in my own town after the fact, which I wish that I had known her like when I was directly going through everything. But word of mouth, like the whole town knew about my diagnosis. The whole town knew. Everybody knew. And so this girl was getting her teeth cleaned at the dentist, and the hygienist was like, "Oh, do you know Taylor?" And she was like, "No." And she basically, long story short, she had just gone through everything that I had gone through at the same time. Like she lived 3 streets from me, and we went through everything together, not knowing each other. And then we met each other. We got together for coffee, like after we both like had double mastectomies, went through chemo, radiation, all the things. And we got to meet each other like finally. And it's like we call each other breasties because we're like great, we're good friends and we can just relate with everything. And it's like, sometimes you can really take the dark of something and turn it into something light. But I think just positivity is key. And yeah, to answer your question, I just think, I don't know, staying positive for my kids was like number one. They saw me at my absolute worst.
I think that you having kids that were old enough to understand
Mhm.
throws a whole new
Oh, yeah.
dynamic into it. I mean, for all the challenges having a newborn and a 1.5-year-old during that presented, I still am so grateful that they weren't at an age where they knew, and
Mhm.
really they're not now. And I don't go through chemo anymore, so I don't look sick, which is helpful because my 3-year-old is, he's getting to an age where he's starting to notice things. But I mean, I can't imagine having to navigate those conversations while you are going through those dark, dark thoughts
Yeah.
in your head that you have to try and get rid of. But I also wanted to say, you were saying you woke up and you just didn't turn on, like I didn't turn on the light. I was like that too. Like I also was like, I'm gonna die. You instantly go into this really dark place
And it's just
when
awful.
something
Like
like
here
this.
we are, like point blank, like here we are in our 30s. This came out of freaking left field, right? So here I am having this normal life, so normal with my family, with my kids, with my friends, and then you're thrown a cancer diagnosis and you're like, what the hell even just happened? Like, I never knew what it felt like to like be depressed and be down. Like, but my body hurt. Like my body hurt. I couldn't even get out of bed because I was just in a dark, dark, dark place. So,
Yeah. I think what's interesting too, though, at least for me, when I was in that dark place and the thoughts that were going through my head were around leaving my kids
mhm,
and like I have to be here for
mhm,
them, like for my husband. And they say like in your darkest moments, it can put into perspective the things that you have.
Mhm.
And it really did for me.
Absolutely.
It's like, okay, I feel this way and I'm so scared because I'm so lucky
Mhm.
to have two amazing, healthy kids, to have found a great man to spend my life with and have a good marriage. And like, it just brought to light all of the things that I just was kind of taking for granted,
Mhm.
and how lucky I was to have these things in spite of this terrible diagnosis.
Yeah.
And that perspective of like how lucky I was to have these things that made the thought of not being here so terrifying,
Mhm.
like, made me so grateful that I am able to have the life that I
And
do,
we're here to tell our story. And that's
Yeah.
the biggest, that's the biggest joy that we can get out of this whole thing, right?
Mhm.
And we are very glad that you are.
Mhm.
So when you're looking back now to kind of like, I don't want to use the word reminiscing because that has kind of like a positive context and we're not reminiscing on it. But when you're looking back to the beginning of your journey, is there anything that you wish you knew or that you could kind of like tell yourself now that you knew at the beginning?
Get your eyebrows microbladed, lady.
That's so funny. I knew
It sounds
when I
so
was going
vain
to
of
the
me,
chemo
but it's
and I started losing them,
100%.
I was like, shit, I need to go get the microblade. And they're like, no, you can't do that now. You have no immune
Yep.
system. And I'm like,
Yep.
ugh.
Same. It sounds so vain of me, but everyone's like, what would your advice be? I'm like, get your eyebrows microbladed. Like, hello, that's like the
Mhm.
first call, like after your oncologist, of course. Like, but like after all the things. You need to do that, ladies,
Yeah.
because I wish I did that.
Yeah, because I mean, I cold capped. I don't know if you
Yeah.
did.
I
And
was
I
fully
kept
bald.
a lot. Did you? So I kept like all of my hair through those 12 treatments. And then when I started doing the AC, I ended up at the end of it probably losing, like, I would say 70% of my hair,
Yeah.
but I still had like 30% of it. But I had no eyebrows, no eyelashes.
Hmm.
I mean, I have no hair like anywhere in my body, which also, that's kind of great
Yeah.
if you lose
That
all
was the
your hair.
positive.
That
Positives,
was
yeah,
that was
positives of this
yeah.
That was
disease.
great.
But
Yeah.
it makes you look sick. So like
Yeah.
like when I was 12 treatments in, I had a full head of hair,
Mhm.
but I had no eyebrows and no eyelashes,
That's
and
the
people,
thing.
like,
It's
you
like,
can tell.
you believe it or not, like I had my wig, which was amazing. It was from Beverly Hills. It was like so good. Okay, right? Like matched my
I
hair.
say I literally say to
Mhm.
everyone, like,
Yeah.
because I do hair, so I encounter women that go through this or their mothers or anything.
Mhm.
I always reference Taylor's wig
So
because if
good.
you did not know that Taylor had cancer, you did not know that Taylor had
No, like
cancer.
it was
She looked
so good.
identical.
So I guess that's
Yeah,
like my
that's so
advice.
good.
Like that would be like my two things. And again, it sounds so freaking vain of me, but let me tell you something. When you are stripped everything as a woman, like that to me, I would wake up and I would be like, wow. Like I remember looking in the mirror at the end and I was just like, I can't do this. Like this is like, it was just like I was like scared of my own like
Yeah.
it sounds so bad to say, but like I would be like, holy shit, like wow. Like it
Yeah.
robs you of everything, like literally everything. And it's your lashes that so I would have my wig on and I'm like, okay, that's fine. But my lashes and my brows, like you just that's what makes
I
you
don't
look sick, you know?
Let me tell you, that does not, I think, in any way, shape, or form make you vain. I think that if I mean, vain would be like, oh, I don't look like myself. Let me go out and buy this bag. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
No.
if you're stripped of everything, like
Yeah.
your eyebrows and your eyelashes are gone, that's not vain. That's like literally not having a part that you've always had. On top of the fact that you're losing your hair, on top of the fact that you're going through these treatments, like you want to do anything, I have to imagine, to just feel like yourself,
Mhm.
whatever that might be.
Yeah. It was not toward it was like I was good up until like I would say I had like one chemo left. and I was sick. Like, we went to Florida, and I look back at pictures, and I was like, my coloring was bad. I had no lashes, no brows. I wore my wig, but I just looked,
Yeah.
ugh, like my face was so puffy from all the steroids, the
Yeah.
meds. Like, I just look back, and I'm like, oh my God, I was like I feel so good now because I'm like, I've come so far from like being where I was like during that time. So
I
yeah.
made myself. So I remember one of my a dear friend of mine went through a cancer diagnosis and went through chemotherapy and lost all her hair. And right when I was diagnosed, I was with her having coffee, and she showed me a picture of she took a picture of herself when she was like knee deep in the chemo, had lost
Mhm.
everything, and I like audibly gasped
Mhm.
because it looked nothing like her. It
Mhm.
was crazy to me that that was the outcome of her going through this treatment. And then I went through it, and the same thing happened in terms of losing everything, the puffiness, no color.
Mhm.
And made sure that I took a picture of
Oh, me
myself
too.
because I can reference
Mhm.
it and remember like how far, like where I was
Mhm.
and then where I am now. And, it's a night and day.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder of, how far, like on my bad days
Mhm.
and
Your
the
bad days
days I
now
feel
really aren't so bad, you know?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah, that's
it's crazy,
yeah.
but that's the reality.
Mhm.
So, what advice would you guys give people going through a similar journey?
Mine is kind of twofold. So going back to what we were talking about in the beginning when Taylor was sharing her diagnosis story, being your own advocate, I call it being the CEO of your health. Um, that is so important. From advocating for yourself to making sure your doctor's appointments. I mean, I have so many doctor's appointments now, still going through this, like making sure all of those are scheduled, making sure my scans are scheduled every 3 months. Like, you think that the doctors, like coordinators and the nurses would do this, but in my experience, like the practice is so busy that these things get dropped, so easily. Like, I have to be on top of it all for myself to make sure it's all done. Um, so I do that. And another story, when I had this reoccurrence happen, they initially thought that the imaging showed it was a break. So, when I got to do the biopsy, I was literally laying on the table I had already had the like local anesthesia, the IV in me. The radiologist reviewed the imaging. He's like, this is a break. I don't know why we're doing a biopsy. Like, this is a painful biopsy. It's a bone biopsy. Are you sure you want to do this? He's like, I called your oncologist in the back to tell him that I think this is a break. We shouldn't do it, but he didn't answer. So he's like, what do you want to do? And previously I probably would have been like, oh, then don't do it. I'm good. I'll go home. You think it's a break? That sounds great. I'm gonna go. But, after learning that you have to be your own advocate and push and be the CEO of your health, I was like, no, do it. Do the biopsy. And it came back positive.
And thank
Had
God,
it had I
yeah.
not done it, we would have waited another 3 months until my next scan. It would have grown and maybe spread to another place. So, that just kind of drills in the hammer in terms of like you really have to make these things happen for yourself. And then the other thing that I really, really stress for anyone going through this type of situation, cancer, which is completely out of our control, and something that I've really struggled with because I'm a control freak, and it leads to a lot of anxiety and a lot of dark thoughts. Something that I have found to help me cope with the inability to control what happens with this cancer is to control everything else that I can to keep myself healthy. Working out 5 days a week, seeing a therapist every other week, eating not processed foods as healthy as I can. I go to a naturopath. I'm on supplements. I make sure I spend time outside in the sun. I go to acupuncture. Like, everything that I listen to podcasts, to educate myself on functional medicine and research and like other people's stories to give me hope. all of those things I can control. And it gives me a sense of sense of control.
Sense of
It,
control,
it
yeah.
just makes me feel like I have a hand in keeping myself healthy. So that's the biggest advice I would give if someone's spiraling with a diagnosis and they feel like everything is completely out of their control and they feel so overwhelmed with all of the doctor's appointments and all of the treatments and all of the things. I mean, for me, what's really worked is educating myself and controlling everything that I can, as meticulously as I can, and taking back my power with my own health.
I think the last thing missing for you is to move to California because it's a very California lifestyle that you're living now,
I
Jess.
know. It's really
So
tough being in the
let's just,
Northeast and
John,
having,
if you're listening, which you should be, get the family out here, okay? For your wife.
for me, I also told him I've planted the seed that in the winter time I have to go down south a few times to get the sun.
Oh my gosh.
And
Wait, don't mean to cut you off, but let me just tell you really quick what happened to me. And I don't mean to cut you off.
no, it's
But when
fine.
I was like, it was my second to last chemo. My levels were off the charts, bad, down. I was like awful, like awful, awful, awful. We had a trip to Florida planned, and I said to my oncologist, I said, "Do you think I should go?" And he said, "Go." We went just from being down south and being in the sun, and I came back. I was like a brand new person, and he was
Yeah.
like stunned. Like he was like, "What just happened to you?" Like it was right before my last chemo, and he couldn't even believe. I was like, South
Here I
Florida,
am, Doc.
South Florida.
I know. Well, at least if I can't get him to move across the country, at least I know that like he has to just pay for me to go somewhere nice
Yes.
in the sun during
It's
our
so
3 month
important. It
long.
is so important to
It
do
is.
that.
It really is.
I did it throughout my
So
whole treatment, and it's so important to just continue to do that. Life
yeah.
is too short. What do I say? I
Yeah.
say, eat the cake, drink the wine, book the flight.
There you go.
That's it. That's it.
I love that too.
So
Great. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Taylor?
no, I think just really, be your own advocate, your own best advocate. That's it. It's simple. It's to the point. It's just if you feel something, say something. If you have a bad feeling in your gut, if you think that something's wrong, pursue it. Tell them you want testing. And same thing for your kids. Like now I'm like crazy even for my children. Like with doctors, I'm like, I don't know about that. Like, let's, dig in further. And I don't care. I don't care if they think I'm crazy. Like, we have one life to live.
Mhm.
And I love how you put it, Jess. Like, you're the CEO of your own health. And guys, you gotta just have a voice because I so wish that I could press rewind back to February, back to that.
Did you ever say anything to that doctor? I would have said something to that OBGYN.
No, I fired her.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't.
Good.
Everyone was like, "You should sue her." I'm not that type of person. I'm like, what am I
Right.
going to get out of that? Like, I'm alive. Like, it could be worse. Like, yeah, it could have been a better situation, but like, that's just not me. It's really not. And
Well,
I'm not.
hopefully she learned
Oh,
her lesson.
I'm pretty sure she did. Like,
hopefully.
she. Wonder if she's going to hear this somehow, somewhere.
She better. I'll forward it. Get her email. Give me her email. I'll make sure she gets it.
She felt really, really, really bad. And I think she was actually shitting her pants like after the fact because she was probably like I fucked up, like she knew 100% she knew. She came and visited me when I had my mastectomy, like just all the things. And then I couldn't stay with her. Are you kidding me? Like,
No. Yeah.
no way. No way. So yeah, really my biggest message is just be your own advocate. And if I could help
Yeah.
one person and just one person that's out there that's like, oh, I, feel something, but I don't have time to go to the doctor. If one person hears this and they're like, you know what, let me make an appointment, then I did my job. So.
And to add on to that, like look for, I mean, there's a lot coming out now about dense breasts.
Mm.
And
Mine were
for
dense. Were
me,
yours?
yeah, mine are very
Mhm.
dense. And because of that, I never did self-checks
Yeah.
because I was like, I could do a self-check tomorrow and I feel bumps
Mhm.
everywhere because my boobs are so
Yeah.
dense. But now in hindsight, I know that if you have dense breasts, it increases your
Mhm.
risk of getting breast
Yep.
cancer. So I know, like, when Olivia Munn was diagnosed, she said that there's some tests, risk tests that you can do, and it's based on not only family history, but it's based on like your age and if your breasts are dense, like I would say do that too.
Yeah.
Like do your
Absolutely.
self exams, but if you have dense breasts, like take it a step further and figure out if there's a test that you can do to see if you have a higher risk and start getting screens sooner because of that. Because it could be a situation where you can't feel the lump, but
Yeah.
if you did a mammogram, something could show up. But you just don't know unless you figure out what your risk is.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I would also say too, like, don't let age be your hesitation
Mhm.
because this is why we're doing this is, I'm 36 and you guys are both 35 and went through it when you were 33, 32. So age can no longer be a factor as to why we
No.
put it
No.
off.
Nope. Exactly. I mean, it 30 at minimum, you
Mhm.
know? It's
Yeah,
yeah.
it's scary. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know. They say, the new kind of standard has come out recently about now starting screenings at 40, but frankly, I think that's a little too
Yeah,
late.
that is too late. That's
Mhm.
way too late. Look at you and I. If we waited till we were 40, even mine, if I didn't go to the doctor that day, I'm like, if I didn't go because I was busy and I had to do my Christmas shopping or whatever the hell it was, I would have been stage 4, who knows, terminal by in 2 months after that.
Yeah.
I would not be
Yeah.
here today. Like, you can't wait for that,
Mm.
you know?
And I also want to add, just from my specific situation, being that it is stage 4, which is, considered not curable, and like sounds really scary. I don't know, for anyone that is listening and is going through that, I hope that they can like hear my story and like
And know that stage 4 is
it's
you
okay.
can
Like I'm
yeah,
good. I work
yeah.
out 5 days a week. I'm
Mhm.
strong. Like I
Stage
do
4
all the
isn't
things.
like you're crippled in bed with a death
Yeah.
sentence.
I'm
So
living a good life.
mhm,
I know that I'm going to be here for years and years and years. Like
mhm,
I know I'm going to be
mhm.
here regardless of it being not curable. Like I just, I have that intuition, that feeling that I'm going to be fine. So
I love that.
it's really scary. And like it sent me down a hole when that biopsy came back positive, but you kind of let it settle and you rebound and you go on. And now, I'm on a whole new treatment plan. I have more doctor's appointments now than I did when I was in remission, but like I'm fine. I'm extremely healthy. I just have this stupid disease in my
Yes,
body.
you keep it
Um,
moving because that's what we have to do. That's what you have to do,
yeah,
right?
like I'm managing it. I'm living a great life. Like I'm fine.
Mhm.
I work full time. Like I'm a mom. So I don't want people, I want people to hear that and find some hope there
Yep.
because it's it's
Would
different
you
than
say though that like when you're going through it, like it is your husband's responsibility to like make sure the house is clean and like you only have enough energy for yourself, really? You know what I mean? Like, so I would say that that's on like husbands, right? Like they have to do those things, the cooking, the
yeah, they gotta
watching the
lean in.
kids,
I
right?
will say John has like he does all like gender roles are not a thing in this house. So I'll give him all the credit,
Wow.
which I do not do often. I hope that he gets really happy that I'm saying this on like something that's being like going out.
We'll
He
cut
always
this part. We'll cut this part.
he always complains that I never give him enough credit, which he's right. But like here I am giving the credit.
Mine's in bed. My kids are like gonna come through the ceiling. Like there's fighting going on and wrestling. It's 9:30 at night.
Yeah.
Mine's sleeping peacefully. I'm on a podcast. It's fine.
Yeah, we're up way past our
Oh my
bedtime.
god.
This, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's like the best thing I can do. And it's very different than how I've usually handled this. Like when I go through these hard times, I usually go inward and I shut down. I especially did when I got this reoccurrence diagnosis. I didn't tell a lot of people, and I told John, like, we're going to keep this a secret because I don't want to give it life. And now here I am talking very openly about it. And I feel like that's the right thing, because I find so much comfort. I mean, cancer is a very lonely diagnosis. It's a really shitty club to be a part of. And so when I'm able to hear stories of other people who have either beaten cancer and are great, or like Taylor, or are living with stage 4 and doing great things, like that makes me feel a lot. It brings a lot of comfort. So I really hope that this right now will serve as that for someone else in the future.
You're amazing,
Definitely.
Jess.
Yeah,
Thanks.
you're both so incredibly strong. And I think I can speak on behalf of both myself and Kyra when I say thank you so, so much to both Jess and Taylor for just being willing to be so vulnerable and brave in sharing your stories with us. Because like you just said, Jess, like it's so important for us to speak about our experiences and share them with others, so that even if it's one person listening that feels like, wow, like I don't feel as alone, it's worth it just, to have that connection with someone, and to feel like, okay, I was too scared to go to the doctor or get checked, but now I'm going to go. It's worth it to share the experiences for that. So we are so glad that you chose Structured Chaos as your space to share your story. And we hope for our listeners that you enjoyed listening and that you learned something. We will have some resources linked below, as well as our fundraiser for breast cancer research. So please check that out. We are raising money for the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, and they're doing all kinds of amazing things and finding a cure. So Jess will no longer have to say that stage 4 is incurable, because they're going to find a cure. So go check all of that stuff out in the description below, and we will catch you next week.
Thanks for doing this,
Bye.
guys.
Thank you, guys.